نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسألونك عن الأهلة قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج وليس البر بأن تأتوا البيوت من ظهورها ولكن البر من اتقى وأتوا البيوت من أبوابها واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون. Respectful honorable friends, the verses that I've recited to you are a continuation with the sequence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning various different injunctions of the Sharia, and this sequence will continue until the end of Surah Baqara. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention with regards the moon and the position of the moon, with regards various ahkam, laws of the Sharia. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ, they ask you with regards the ahilla, the chand, the moon. قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ, say it is mawaqit, fixing time, linnas, for people, wal hajj, and for the hajj. In this verse, the first section, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ, they question you with regards the moon. Who? Those questioning are the Sahaba, and the one questioned is Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Sahaba were such dear friends that they very rarely asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam questions. To that extent that in the entire Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of only 14 questions. 14 times wherein the Sahaba actually asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam with regards an open injunction which has been mentioned in the Quran. They were not like the previous ummats, but in the previous Anbiya, they were bombarded with questions and objections by their followers. And moreover, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam from the Banu Israel, which we have done in the past. The Sahaba were such dear friends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself mentions one of their qualities, that sami'na wa ta'na, whatever they heard, they obeyed it. Sami'na, we heard it, wa ta'na, and obeyed it. This was the condition of the Sahaba, that whatever they heard from Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they obeyed it and they immediately brought it into practice. Not that they would start questioning and asking that why, what is the purpose behind it, why should we be doing it, how much we should be doing it. None of these type of questions would they ask. Lest we find at times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, who would mention certain things so that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam can mention it to the Sahaba, because it was something that they wanted to know. For example, the hadith of Ihsan, where Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam came in a form of a human being and asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam questions with regards what was Iman, what was Ihsan, and with regards the hereafter, the day, the final day. These two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam in the form of a person, because the Sahaba were too modest to ask Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It wasn't that they didn't have the urge. They had a great urge and they had a great desire with regards learning deen. But because of the utmost respect for Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they would not ask Nabi Kareem sallallahu questions. This was out of the haya, modesty and respect for Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One Sahabi mentions that when we would sit in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we would sit in such a manner that even birds would be able to come and sit on our heads. Meaning that they would be in such mode that they would be just with their gazes lowered down, sitting with some utmost respect, that a bird would even be able to come and sit on their heads without it being disturbed. That's how much respect they had for Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So obviously they did not like to ask. And also at the same time, because of the various verses already revealed, they also knew that if we ask too much, then it shouldn't be that we become also like the Banu Israel. The case with the Banu Israel was, the more they asked, the more difficult it became for them. And we've done this in the past, various different injunctions wherein they questioned, and the more they questioned, the more difficult it became for them. The initial ruling was straightforward for them to go and sacrifice a cow. But then they started asking what nature it should be, what size it should be, what color it should be. And the more they asked, the more difficult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it, which we have done in the past. So the Sahaba was such that Sami'na wa ta'na, whatever they heard, they obeyed. So there were very few times when they actually asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with regards and injunctions. One we have already done, wherein in just a few verses ago, wherein the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala asked, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, which we just did when they asked with regards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was He close or was He far. That was one of the questions. Another one is here where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ, they question you with regards to the moon. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala questioned and asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with regards the maslihat, the hikmat of the moon. Not with regards why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the moon, but the question was with regards how they should benefit from the moon and what its purpose were. The masjid, the hikmah, wisdom behind it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself answers it by saying, قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتٌ, say it is a fixed time, لِلنَّاسِ, for people, وَالْحَجِّ, and for Hajj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of one of the purposes of the moon is that here mawaqit, that one of the functions of the moon is that it defines and it mentions to us, it shows and indicates towards time. And we all know that there are many injunctions of Islam which are based and dependent upon the moon. That without the calculation of the moon, without the moon, we would not be able to practice these. As Allah makes mention of one, wal Hajj, with regards Hajj itself. Time is destined by two things and calculated by two things: the sun and the moon. In today's time, the English calendar, the Christian calendar that we use, is based upon the solar, the sun. The Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar based upon the moon. Since the beginning of time, time was calculated by means of the moon. Everybody utilized the moon. Then it was Julius Caesar in a 46th year that he then moved away from the utilization of the moon, and he turned towards utilizing the sun and calculating day and time by means of the sun. Gradually it became a common practice. To that extent then it became something adopted by the church, by which then in all Christian countries the calendar was formed by means of the sun. To that extent then it became something international. Unless we find all dates are now to do with the solar, the days that we have in the calendar. The lunar calendar is what the Muslims utilize and what Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had adopted, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had chosen for us. The reason behind it is because calculating of the moon is much easier and simpler compared to that of the sun. One is the sun. We utilize the sun, for example, in many ibadats also. Sunrise and sunset. Subh Sadiq is based on the sun. Maghrib is also based with regards to the sun. So the fasting of the day is based with regards to the rising and setting of the sun. That is normal everyday usage. But at the same time, the sun, the orbit that it travels through is much more complicating compared to that of the moon. The moon has been created much simpler. The Sahaba, one thing they asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which they couldn't understand, is that why is the moon If the moon was there just to give us light in the night, then why do you have a full moon, and then why do you have a new moon, and why does the size of the moon increase and decrease? So they didn't understand, if the purpose was just for light, then it would be full moons throughout the month. Now why this method of it increasing, decreasing, warning, etc.? So for this is because hiya mawaqit, it gives us time. So that when you see the first moon, you know that it is the first of that month. And then as it increases, you know that it's the first day, it's the second day, it's the third, fourth day of the calendar, etc. And then eventually till it becomes the new moon, the full moon, you know it's the middle of the month. And then again it decreases until it becomes the start of the next month. So in this way we are able to calculate the amount of the days of the month. Now this is very, very important and imperative, especially with regards to various different injunctions of the Quran. For example, namaz खुला है पीछे के कमरे. So it helps a person with regards defining the time and for different ibadats. For example, one is Hajj. We need to know the days of Hajj and the month of Zil Hijjah. This is defined by means of the moon. With regards to the month of Ramadan, this is also defined by means of the moon. In the same way with regards a person's iddat of a female, this is also when she is divorced, the waiting period, this is also defined by means of the moon. The Eid is also defined by the moon. Qurbani is also defined by the moon. So there are many such ibadat which are defined by means of the moon. All the various different months of the calendar also. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the moon itself is not just there as an ornament there in the sky, something to marvel at, but it has its purpose, just like each and every other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. None whatsoever have been created in vain, they all have a purpose. The purpose of the moon is hiya mawaqit, it is there to show you time. One of the other aspects of it is also with regards to the zakat also. Zakat is also calculated on the moon. One of the other wisdoms with regards utilizing the moon is that, as we know, the lunar year is shorter than the solar year, due to which we find that it is 11 days shorter. So each year it rotates. The bounties of this, the wisdom of this is that the month of Ramadan, instead of it being fixed on a specific month, it will always be in January or February, by it rotating, each and every single month has the blessings of it being blessed with the auspicious month of Ramadan. So no month of the year would not get the month of Ramadan. In this way it keeps on rotating. That's why Fuqaha have also mentioned that with regards to zakat also, that after 33 years a person should give an extra year's zakat because of the increase with regards to the difference between the lunar and the solar year. After 33 years, 1 full year of a person, this is when a person, because normally people calculate a lot of times utilizing the solar years, solar calendar, etc. So in this way a person then won't end up deficient. Otherwise he'll end up paying 1 year's less zakat. So after 33 years he needs to pay an extra year's zakat, which he has lost out every year because of the difference of the 11 days. So here mawaqit linnasi wal hajj, it is there for mawaqit, for time. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the rotating of the moon simpler compared to that of the sun. The calculating by means of the sun with regards to time, not morning and evening, with regards to days of the month, is very complicating. Hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has simplified it for us by means of us calculating, utilizing the moon. Which means that by means of the moon it should really in reality be much easy for people. That's why in those days obviously they didn't have calendars and they didn't have such types of digital clocks, etc., wherein now you can already predict the dates for so many years to come. So they had to rely with regards to the sighting of the moon. So the months, etc., the days, everything was based on the moon. And not only that, dear friends, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such husban, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban, that the sun and the moon rotates in its orbits according to a prescribed manner. The moon doesn't just rise and set, neither the sun rise and set whenever it desires to, neither do you find a new moon or a full moon anyhow whenever it wants, but it is in its own orbit. That's why it is something, astronomy is also a field, a science of its own in Islam, where Islam excelled greatly by means of in the lines of astronomy. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made mention of these various different verses of the Quran, making mention of the moon, the system of the moon, that it rotates in its orbits in a specific manner. Each day it increases, it moves from wherever you first saw it to another place. So the first moon the new moon of every month will be sighted in a different country. On Pacific days you'll see the moon, the size and the day that it is. And then the moon, when it completes an entire orbit, then it goes away, meaning now you can't see it at all. And thereafter now you see the first new moon, the crescent of the first new moon. So it all has its destined orbit and route that it takes. Never will it rewind or go forward a bit before time. It doesn't do any of this, but it rotates the manner it has to, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted it a specific duty to do. And it carries out this duty. Because of this, dear friends, you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a lot of ibadat easy for us. Because in today's time, dear friends, a lot of the times calendars, everything which are based on whether it's the solar or lunar, have been made easy by us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by means of modern technology. For example, with regards to the moon itself, all the research on the moon by the astronomers have now come to an end. They have already got all the records of when the new moon will be and where it will be, what age it will be able to be sighted for many years to come. It's all there. Even from now already you can find out and get information with regards 10-20 years down the line, which month the month of Ramadan will fall in, when most probably the Eids, etc. will be. That's how easy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made things for us by means of modern technology. To that extent, dear friends, today, never mind, you don't need to go to the moon. Just sitting on your computer, you can have the moon in front of you, and each day's size and age of the moon is there in front of you. There's such type of programs available wherein a person can see exactly the size of the moon and the exact location of the moon in front of you. Each day you can see the moon increasing and where it is located. That's how simple Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it for us. But then we come to the issue that unfortunately, despite this, dear friends, year in and out, we still have great problems with regards defining the sighting of the moon. Scientists and astronomers even have a laugh at the Muslims, because their research has come to an end. They're talking about Mars. They've already got the things in Mars. They're talking about Mars, that when men can move now, make hijrah to Mars now. So they're already planning ahead. They're already talking about building houses and things in Mars. And dear friends, we are still fighting with regards to the moon. Something which is long finished and long dusted, gone put away. We are still fighting on that, whereas they're already going to the moon, to Mars. Whereas, dear friends, it was Muslims and Islam that taught them what astronomy was, but now they've left us behind and they have far exceeded us. This is because we are not understanding the method, the injunctions of the Quran, the verses of the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly explains to us the manner in which He has created the moon and the purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the moon. If you were to understand this, and you will find, unfortunately, there was once a time wherein ulama, when they would study, one of the things that they would study would also be astronomy. But then in later years, this came to an end and they were not taught astronomy, due to which, unfortunately, the layman seems to understand astronomy, but the ulama are not understanding astronomy. Due to which we find a lot of problems, because people do not understand the system of the moon, that the moon doesn't just rise and set whenever a person wants it to. For example, we have it in our minds that after Maghrib go out, we're definitely going to see the moon, whereas we don't realize that just the way the sun rises and sets, the moon also has a rising and a setting time. So it means that if the moon has already set before the time of Maghrib, go out and look for the moon, you'll never find the moon, because there is no moon there for you to see. So the moon also has its setting time. So you might think that after Maghrib definitely you're going to see it. In the same way, dear friends, if you go out and notice, because unfortunately in this country we don't go out to see the moon. In other countries and in a lot of villages up till now, dear friends, people still go out to see the moon. Although they might be living in climates where it's possible to see the moon, but they still focus and work with regards to the moon. They don't know the English calendar at all, they still work with the moon. They go out inside the moon, wherein people who are illiterate will also be able to tell you exactly what moon it is. They just look at the moon and tell you which one it is, what date it is, and they'll know more about the moon than people who are educated and literate in our societies. For example, the new moon also, each and every month you'll notice it will be exactly in the same direction. The direction which you look in, so those who are on the roof, it is in this direction in West Town. Every month you'll see the first moon there. So if a person now, we're going out to look for the moon for Ramadan or Eid, and mashallah we're all on the roof of the academy, and now we're all looking in that direction. Somebody's looking there, somebody's looking there. Look for the moon, you won't find the moon at all, because we're looking in the wrong direction. The moon doesn't just rise anywhere and you just see it anywhere. Because it is in its fixed destination, it's got its fixed route that it's going to take, dear friends. It doesn't take any diversions or any other shortcuts, etc., that you find it there instead of here. It will rise exactly in its place and it will set in the same direction. Every month, if you notice, look in one direction and you will see it exactly in that direction. And in summer times, dear friends, this notion that we've had that in England we can never see the moon is a fallacy. In good climate, dear friends, it is possible to sight the moon. Especially in these months, clear months of summer, etc., it is possible to sight the moon. And when Ramadan, Qurbani, these times occur in these months, it is possible that we can just look outside and sight the moon ourselves. We don't need to rely on any other information coming from anywhere else whatsoever. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dear friends, has made it easy for us. In the same way, the crescent, the new moon, and the warning one, the moon, the end of the circle, they're both in different shapes. This is also something that we need to know. Whereas normally what happens, we go out, we don't even know whether the moon, if you see it in this direction or that direction, whether it's the coming one or the going one. We don't even have a clue at all. So a person may be looking at the moon, the 29th of the month, and he says, there's a new moon. The 29th he look at and he says, this is the new moon. But what he doesn't realize is this is the moon, this is the end of the month, not the start of the month. But we'll just look at it and say, well, there's it, we've seen the moon and that's it. So these are the type of things, dear friends, we need to know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very easy for us. And why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy for us? Because very, very important ibadat are based upon the moon. Hajj a person needs to do correctly according to the moon. Ramadan also needs to be done according to the moon. The Eidain has to be done correctly according to the moon. These are very, very important ibadat that a person needs to do according to the sighting of the moon. For example, a person now starts fasting in the month of Sha'ban, wherein Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, لَا يَتَقَدَّمَنَّ, that with great emphasis, he says, الْبَتَّ تَحْقِيق, which means that with great emphasis he emphasizes that do not start the fast of Ramadan prior to his time in Sha'ban. And at the same time, if a person finishes his fast prior to time, there's great threat that instead of doing 29 fasts, he's only done 28, and he's left behind what? Not just a nafil fast, but a first fast. This is what can happen if a person doesn't calculate the moon correctly. Now Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has said as correctly that look at the sighting of the moon and base your fasting, etc., on the sighting of the moon. And this is what we go about. Our Shariat says with regards to the hilal, the sighting of the moon, and we will always remain on sighting of the moon. So if somebody tells us that's it, there's no need to sight the moon, the observatories have told us exactly, and then we just do things accordingly, that is incorrect. And this is something that there are certain groups in this country who have based their timings on what observatories say. And they already from before time will say exactly that on this day will be the first of Taraweeh. This is incorrect. This is totally going away from the method of the Sharia. But what we do is these calculations that have been given to us, there is no harm in us utilizing and making use of these calculations as an idea, as a base for us to base our sighting on. Which means that if the observatories have told us when it is possible and when it isn't possible, so at least by this we know that if when they say it's not possible to sight the moon, and somebody comes and says to us that they've sighted the moon, then we know that they have sighted something but not the moon. And if they say that it is a time wherein it is possible to sight the moon, or certain countries it is possible for them to see the moon, and in that time if somebody comes and says to us the moon has been sighted, then we won't reject it, we will accept the testimony. So we utilize the calculations as an aid to help us in making our decision. Otherwise you'll get people who will say that they've sighted the moon, but in reality they have seen something else but the moon. Because at times, dear friends, Shaitan also plays with a person's mind. Many times you'll find if somebody has it in his mind that he wants to just see the moon, he'll go out and he'll see something else but not the moon. Or he may think that he's seen the moon. Sometimes it might just be a bird, because the new moon, dear friends, if you see it once, you turn away, you won't see it again. It might just be a split in the clouds which might look like the moon, a bird flying, an aeroplane. It can be any object of this nature in the heavens which a person looks at and he may think that it is the moon. And then if somebody comes, or for example if somebody who can't just see beyond his own palm, now he comes to you and says to you that he sighted the moon and he's got the really double glazed, triple glazed glasses like me. Or somebody who has just one eye and he comes and tells the people that I've seen the moon. So somebody who can't just see it, he needs somebody to help him walk himself. Now he comes and tells you I've sighted the moon. Now would we just accept the testimony of such a person? Now obviously if you have your own motives you will accept such type of testimony also. But otherwise when such great ibadat are based on such testimony, then you won't just expect it. Because you know that this person himself, obviously it is impossible that he has sighted it. And then instead of just listening to him, you'll even ask him at least, okay, tell us where you've seen it, which direction, what have you seen? So it shouldn't be a case that you get the testimony of 3-4 people, as it has happened in the past, dear friends. The testimony of 3-4 people, and you ask them, where did you see it? All 4 of them say that they saw it in 4 different directions. All 4 of them see different size, different shapes of the moon. Now this I'm telling you of our own experience, wherein a few years ago, because of circumstances, I was personally involved in a group where we had to go and take the witness of certain people who sighted the moon not far from here, just down the road in Scout Hill, from our places, in Dewsbury itself. The moon was sighted a few years ago. Coincidentally, at a critical time here also, wherein 3-4 people sighted the moon. It was neighbors, wherein 2 females and 1 youngster sighted the moon. All 3 of them said they were, one of them saw it and he shouted for the others to come, so they all came out of the house. They were standing in the same garden, but all 3 saw the moon in 3 different directions. And all 3 of them, dear friends, when you asked them to draw what they saw, each one drew 3 different moons. One drew it this way, one drew it this way, and one actually drew it this way. So they must have seen some aliens or UFO, something or the other, but they definitely didn't sight the moon, and in reality it was in a total wrong direction. It was impossible, dear friends. And as I said, there were those people who had taken the testimony of these people, had written it down also, and had accepted the testimony of these people who had saw something else but not the moon. So dear friends, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made things so easy for us. That's why I mentioned that astronomers of the world today, they laugh at the Muslims, because when they know themselves that the moon is not there, the Muslims are saying that they've seen the moon, they have a big laugh at the Muslims. What are these people seeing? They are seeing things. Now to move away from this topic, which is better because in this country this topic is something that somehow it is always an unsteady path to take. However, haqq is haqq. Whatever needs to be addressed should be addressed, because the longer we just put it aside and stop discussing it, it's not going to get solved at all. So one of the purposes is mawaqi, to destined time, linnas wal hajji, and that of hajj is one of many ibadahs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention. Then he says, وَلَيْسَ الْبِرُّ بِأَن تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ زُهُورِهَا وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى وَأَتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention with regards a practice in the days of Jahiliyyah, in which he says, لَيْسَ الْبِرُّ, that piety is not بِأَن تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ زُهُورِهَا, that you enter your homes and return to your homes from the back. وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى, but virtue is those who fear Allah. وَأَتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا, hence enter your homes from its doors. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, hence fear Allah so that you may be successful. In the days of Jahiliyyah, people had a practice, and if they would leave their homes with the intention of undertaking a journey, and it so happened that for some reason the journey got cancelled, so that they had to return without undertaking the journey, then they regarded it to be a bad omen to enter the home from the front door. So what they would do is they would enter the homes from the back side, from the back door. And there are also cases wherein those obviously didn't have terrace houses and these things as we did. So there are also cases wherein they actually broke the walls of the house from behind, so they entered from there. Because they didn't have the luxury as we have, as in 2-3 different entrances of the home, they only had the one. So they actually break the walls of the house and enter from there, regarding it to be a bad omen to enter from the front. This was a practice in the days of Jahiliyyah. So then what happened later on in Islam is that those who decided to go for Hajj, and then for some reason it so happened that they could not complete the Hajj, then they would also return and do the same, that they would enter from behind. They would regard it to be a bad omen to enter from the front. So this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَلَيْسَ الْبِرُّ, that neki, piety, goodness and virtue is not أَن تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ زُهُورِهَا, that which you think that it is better for you that you should return from the back door instead of the front door. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this isn't taqwa, this isn't piety. وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى, whereas neki, piety is what? مَنِ اتَّقَى, that a person fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taqwa is what you should adopt. And what is taqwa? That وَأْتُوا الْبِيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا, that enter your homes from the doors. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the doors, so enter from the doors, don't climb through windows. Some people have a habit of climbing through windows. There were those who enter the cars also through the windows. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made doors for certain purposes, so utilize them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that piety is that you enter as you should do from the doors and not break the walls of the house and enter from behind. On this, there is one very important point that you can deduce from this verse, and that is just the way it is important that a person does not make something which is haram to be halal. In the same way, a person should not make something which is halal to be haram. And this is what happens here. And that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it halal that a person should enter as normal from his home. And now what a person is doing is that he is preventing himself from doing something which is correct and halal, and is now doing something which is incorrect. This is what we realize from here. Which also means, with regards any practice of deen, such practices which are not part of deen, to include these into deen, this as we know is haram, it is bid'ah. At the same time, that which is halal in deen, to abstain from that is also haram. Which means that something that is permissible for you to utilize, something which is permissible for you to do in deen, now a person doesn't implement that, he abstains from that also, this is also extravagance. For example, somebody goes and says, no, you shouldn't use any mics at all. Somebody says that mic system, there was no such thing as PA system, mic systems in those days. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, time of Hajjatul Wida, there were so many thousands of Sahaba there was no mic system at all. His voice, everybody heard his voice. So there's no need for us to have mic system, even in our gatherings, we don't need it. So if somebody says this and now you totally abstain from utilizing the mic system, for example, this is also ghulu, this is incorrect. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't made it haram for us. So when it hasn't been made haram, we should not prevent ourselves from utilizing it. In the same way, for example, air conditioning or fans. If it's now people say that we shouldn't have air conditioners or fans in the masajid, it is against the sunnah of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was no fans or no air conditioning system in the Masjid al-Nabawi in those days. Then we shouldn't have it in today's times. This is also incorrect because there is nothing wrong at all in having these type of things, but rather these things actually assist deen. In today's time also with modern technology, or the modern technology we're seeing today, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala, dear friends, they didn't have tape recorders. In those days people didn't become scholars by means of tape recorders. People didn't become awliya by means of tape recorders. The Sahaba didn't learn deen by means of tape recorders. But it doesn't mean now in today's time we say no, we don't want this technology at all. The Sahaba just heard things and remembered things. One heard it and he told the other person and he passed it on in this way. So we should also not adopt these types of things. It is against the sunnah. This is also incorrect because there's nothing wrong at all. It is modern technology used in its best form. And also it also refers to our deficiency, because in those times they had good memories and they used to be attentive in the programs of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they would hear it attentively, they would then remember it, and then they would go and propagate it to other people. They went home, mentioned it to their children, mentioned it whenever they heard the hadith to their wives and to other people, and in this way Islam reached us. That's why you find the amount of deen that reached us in that time is greater than what we have now. Because as time goes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reduces knowledge amongst the people, and all that which we had before, which was much more in mass amount, and that, dear friends, was without any of these modern forms of technology. Because when they sat in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what they did, they make sure that the mic system was clear. Nothing affecting the mics. So they didn't just come with one mic there, they had two mics. And then when they were there, they made sure that the mic should be focused also on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the camera, we also have cameras in that, so the camera was focused on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then what they would do is, they made sure that they pressed the play button, and it would be memorized where it will be recorded in the memory of the brain. It will be stored in the brain. The eyes, as a camera, was focused on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why we find so many Sahaba. For example, you go back, and if I indicate to you a certain sunnah, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, mention hadith, Ana wa kafitul yatim hakaza. I am a person who looks after yatim, often ala this. I go back and listen to it, you never know what indication I made, which indicates that Nabi Kareem made this indication. But now if you go back and listen to your tape recorders, to your CDs, etc., you won't get this picture at all. However, this picture we got by how? By the Sahaba's focus. Their lenses were focused on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So with their gazes, they were attentive. They saw this and they mentioned it, and we have it in front of us, written on paper in black and white. So, and also we have the words exactly to how it was. So if you record something by tape, we know for sure it is the exact words recorded. Here the Sahaba, they memorized it in their own memories, and they narrated it exactly how Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned it, because they knew that we do not want to change any of the words of this hadith. As well, there are so many Sahaba who are reluctant to narrate any hadiths, just fearing in case if they just change the wordings of the hadith. So it shows us that the wordings of the hadith are also so accurate, and these were recorded and maintained where? In their hearts and in their minds, in their memory, dear friends. This is because they were so attentive in the majlis of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our case, especially when a person is recording, but that's always the case. But sometimes what happens, a person knows, well, I am recording it, so in the talk itself, I can catch up a bit of sleep. It doesn't matter. I'll go home and listen, go over it later on, or am I so record? I'll just get the recording of Abdul Latif. So in the program, I can just chill a bit, relax a bit, get out of the house, and just go in the masjid and relax a bit. I don't have to be attentive or to talk. You can be talking whatever you want. This is our case, as I mentioned, around the world in one Quran Tafseer, isn't it? So this was with regards, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made halal for us, we should not make haram. And that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram, we should not make halal. And this is where we need to define and draw the line with regards bid'ah. Because this is where bid'ah comes about, wherein a person starts practicing such things which are not part of deen and you regard it to be part of deen. This is what becomes bid'ah. One bid'ah, for example, there are those who say that being the month of Rabiul Awwal, and we know that the month of Rabiul Awwal has great auspiciousness because it was in this month the auspicious birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam occurred. Now with regards this month, what should a person do in this month? There will be those who say absolutely nothing at all, it's just like any other day, just carry on as normal, doesn't make any difference at all. And there will be those who go to that extent wherein there's partying, and there's balloons, and there's decorations, and all sorts, carnivals, and all sorts of things. And there are those who people tarnish as and these people do not celebrate at all the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whereas, dear friends, who says that we don't celebrate the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam? But our celebrating the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam is different. Celebrating the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam specifically on a specific day, in a specific manner, is incorrect. Because this is not what Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. He didn't invite people to a specific lecture on his birthday with balloons and food and everything for the Sahaba. No. Neither did the Sahaba after Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam's demise every year on that calendar also organize something specifically on that day, etc. Nothing of this specifically was done. However, if during that month itself people think and ponder with regards to the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is nothing wrong at all. So if it's mentioned that look, this is the blessed month in which, as we say, Laylatul Qadr, blessed night because the Quran was revealed, this is blessed night because this event took place, the day of Jummah, all these things happened on the day of Jummah. In the same way, if we mention that in this month, on the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, etc., and we make mention of these things, there's nothing wrong at all in making mention of it. And those who say that these people don't celebrate the birthday of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they don't make Eid Miladun Nabi, our answer to them is that who says we do not celebrate the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but our Miladun Nabi is every day of the calendar. Every time we wake up in the morning and our eyes open and we read the dua, Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'da ma amatana wa ilayhi nushur, we are celebrating the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam because we are making amal immediately on the sunnat of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we are showing gratitude to Allah, the thanks to you that you have made us and included us amongst the ummah of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Night time comes also, we sleep according to the sunnat manner, and we recite the dua, the masnoon duas shown us by who? Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the night also we show gratitude to Allah that you have created us amongst the ummah of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Our physical appearances celebrates the birthday of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there are those who only celebrated one day of the calendar, and there are those who celebrate the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam every day of their life. So who is the better of the two? And this is the answer to them that who says, yes, you say you believe these Lord don't believe the birthday of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they don't celebrate anything. Yes, we also celebrate the birthday of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but we celebrate it in a correct manner. Wherein we make shukr every day to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if it wasn't for the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where would we be today? This is how we should be celebrating the birthday of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, not the birthday, but the day on which he was born. Showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that because of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam's coming, today we find such a great change in our lives. Just recently, the Home Office mentioned with regards that the crime is at a suitable level. However, violent crime is in the increase. From this time to last year, the recent statistics which was published 2 days ago, they mention how violent crime is in the increase. And they say why? Because of the drinking culture of the inhabitants of this country. That most of the violent crime has to do with underage drinking. And there's all sorts of then solutions and talks, and this analyzer, that analyst comes on saying what should we do, how can we change things, this should be done and that should be done to curb down these type of things. Whereas the defeating the object, the true solution, dear friends, is celebrate the birthday of Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam correctly, and there won't be any crime at all. Implement the sunnah of Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, follow up on the Sharia, there won't be any crime at all. Where there is no drink, there won't be any drunkards, and when there's no drunkards, there won't be any violent crimes committed by people who are drunk. So there won't be such thing at all. There won't be all this binge drinking and all these type of boozing and these type of things. Nothing at all, because Islam, alhamdulillah, totally wipes the problem out from its roots. So when a person hears these type of things, immediately we show gratitude, shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you have granted us the solution, we have the solution, and you have protected us from this. And then there was talk with regards certain parts of the country wherein things happen Friday, Saturday nights, and how people become so drunk and these type of things. And they said the best solution is rather the pubs should be open longer. The people aren't just quickly pouring things into themselves by 11 o'clock, because that's the minute now, so get as much in by 11 o'clock as possible. That's the solution. So the solution they look at are worse things, wherein the solution is totally banned and you have nothing to worry about at all. Alhamdulillah, we find that we don't have to kick anybody out of the masjid because he's causing any problems. He's going to have any violence, any fights, etc. We don't have to worry about the glass, the windows and the things in the masajid, that there's going to be violence in the masajid. As a person becomes drunk out of the love of Allah, that's different. But we don't even get that also. Alhamdulillah, we don't get these type of things to worry about at all. So the solution, dear friends, is in Islam. So every time a person shows gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these, the iman that the person has, the sunnah that he has, the sharia that he has, each time he's doing this, he's celebrating the birth of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Over and over you'll find wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of an injunction, with it everywhere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of taqwa. Every injunction Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of taqwa. Here he mentions this twice. Manit taqwa, the true goodness is taqwa. And then he says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, so that you will be successful. Because if a person doesn't have taqwa, then he'll continue with all the evil customs and rituals that are prevalent. A person who has taqwa, he knows that he'll rather displease the people around him, but he won't displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas a person who doesn't have taqwa, and then he's faced with the dilemma of a custom that he has to follow, then what happens? He'll go with the custom. That if I don't go to whatever program, whatever khatam and these type of things, the relatives will become naraz, they'll become displeased with me. They'll say, why I'm not coming, so I should go instead. Why? Because he didn't have taqwa, he worries about others becoming displeased with him. Whereas whoever has taqwa, then he'll realize, if it is permissible for me to go, he'll go. There's nothing wrong. It's an ibadat to go, for example, wherever it is. Where he knows it's wrong for him to go, it's a custom, it is something which is days of Jahiliyyah, something which is against Islam, the teachings of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then never mind, they can continue to do it. They can despise me for not attending, but wattaqullah, the fear of Allah is more important. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whoever has the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tuflihun, he will always be successful. In all venues and avenues of life, that person will always be successful who has taqwa. Because it is imperative that at all times we keep who happy? We keep Allah and His Rasul pleased. At all injunctions of anyone who we have to please is always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you'll find whoever pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will always be successful. Whereas a person who pleases other people, he might just please them, but at the same time he knows he has displeased Allah, and whoever displeases Allah won't find success at all. And at the same time he will be dissatisfied also. He'll always feel guilty because he knows himself internally that he has displeased Allah and he has pleased mankind. So this itself won't give him rest at all. wherein a person, if he pleases only Allah, and even if circumstances may be difficult for him at the time, he still has hope in him, because he knows, I've pleased Allah, so Allah will find a solution for me, Allah will make it easy for me. But if he displeases Allah, he knows himself that I've pleased them, but Allah will still, somewhere along the line, the smack is definitely going to come. If not on this injunction, not in that injunction or that injunction, somewhere or the other, then the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is definitely going to strike. And when that strikes, dear friends, nobody can protect themselves. And so it is very important that all injunctions, wattaqullah, we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tuflihun, and our success, dear friends, lies only in one thing, and that is in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and adopting taqwa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the understanding of these verses that we recite, we learn, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all taqwa. Wa akhir dawana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.